well, I needed a job, actually. It was a long time ago. I dropped out of graduate school and was looking for something to do. And my graduate work was in grain amaranth. And so I had worked here on the station because they wanted to keep amaranth, which is known as a bad Iowa weed, out of the plots. And the best place they could find to put it was a place that had been used to growing other weedy species. So they put my research program here on the station. So I was used to working here. And so I applied here, and my major professor in college gave me a good recommendation, so I got the job. The main thing is keep it alive, and that's always been a challenge, especially since maize is one of the largest species as far as number of accessions goes that needs a lot of manual labor to maintain it. And so it's always been a challenge to make sure that everything is viable and available. We've always had a fairly large backlog, so my goal is to try to make sure everything is available. And then we try, since we can't make it all available at one time, we try to pull out priorities from what has been ordered and what the community tells us we need to increase, and put priority on increasing that material. Well, I don't know if anybody knows for sure what we stand to lose. I do know that we have already lost some accessions, and we spend a lot of effort trying to go back to those places and recollect those areas and make sure that we haven't lost any genes. We're in a transition right now where molecular biology is taking on and able to manufacture genes, or take genes from one species to another, or from one group of collections to another group of collections. The main thing we'll probably be missing are genes that we can evaluate their usage and maybe put them in from a background that we're not used to growing in the United States, and put it in the United States background from someplace like northern Mexico or Lake Titicaca in the Andes, or someplace like that actually makes our maize much more productive than it would have been otherwise. So if we don't have those, then we're going to have to look for the analogs in other species, or make them up ourselves, which could be much more cost ineffective than what we could do by just having the genes readily available in all the collections that we currently have. I want to make the research efficient. That means having it available. You don't put them off if they think there's something in a particular collection somewhere. They need to have something available for them at that point in time, because grants are short term. They have to be satisfied. The other thing to make their research more efficient, a lot of times they'll need quantities of seed that they can't take the time to regenerate themselves. So my main goal for the community is to make sure that any research that's done is done as efficiently as possible with our materials. The other goal I have is, I think we have a cultural treasure here. If you think about a portrait, a Rembrandt portrait or something like that, the artist might have sat down for 6 months or so and made that portrait, and that was it from start to scratch. Most of our collections took generations of human effort to create what they are today, and so I want to make sure that the historical value of this material is maintained in a living entity rather than just a picture or a seed or some artifact, that they actually can grow the material and get some information about our cultural history too. They weren't curators, and they were called research associates, and we were more or less hired as technicians to maintain the material rather than totally curate. We had a farm manager who saw to everyday management of all the collections, and then we had a research leader who supervised him. So it was kind of a small supervision, but we really were under control. We didn't have much management curatorial duties, let's put it that way. We just did the work to get the crop increased. You got to remember, I started here in 1980, before personal computers anyway. Apple, I think, came out just shortly after that, but we didn't have much except for mainframe computers, and we had catalogs here where we had entries of accession numbers and things like that, and then we used the computers to print those catalogs, but those catalogs were hard copies, and then those had to be sent out to researchers. And you can imagine the postage, so it all relied on the researcher hearing about us, and then we send out the catalog, and then they perused through it, and then they make up their letter and send it back in. So that was pretty inefficient compared to what we're doing now as far as ordering seed. If you can imagine, in the old days where you got your seed catalog in the mail if you requested it, and then made your order that way on a yearly basis, that's sort of how the whole system worked. The feedback, we had to send out letters to the requesters asking for information on how the material satisfied their needs. That was all a manual process. In making a plan for the field, we used, first of all, we went through on a yearly basis all the jars in the collection and evaluated whether we had a quarter of a jar, a tenth of a jar, half a jar, and then those that had a quarter of a jar we set up by pulling seed ahead of time and putting it aside and for grow out for that next season or in a future season. So we might have packets set up for 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road ready to be planted. As I get more helpers, I'm in the field less and less, and in fact I'm getting ready to close out my career by making sure the collection is as good a shape as I can get it in, and that requires me to do more inside things than outside things right now. Plus, as you age, you're less capable in the field. But I've always thought it important that every curator spend a good deal of their time in the field working with the species that they're maintaining so that they can work through the whole process. I've encouraged automation to try to do the job because we had too much to do with the people we had. And by automating it, then you reduced errors and you speed the whole process up. We sat down with accounting ledgers. They were like 8.5 by 17 with all kinds of lines in them. And we wrote out everything that we were going to grow that year and what year it was from and what row it was going to go into and all that kind of thing. And then that ledger, if you made a mistake, you had to start over again. That whole group of 25 or 100 accessions that you set out, you had to start that ledger over because it had to be error-free. We used a lot of whiteout. And then after we planted the material, then that ledger would go in to the secretaries, and then they would type up a field book for us. So you can imagine that manual process just took forever. And at the root of my nature, and I think the most human nature, is we're lazy and we want to do it easier. So I've been interested in computers. I was a computer science major as an undergraduate in college for a while, and so I started figuring out ways to automate things. We did have a secretary that did some IT things, but it was mainly putting on the mainframe at Iowa State. And then GRIN came along, and what they were trying to do is make a mainframe application that everybody at the different locations in the national system could enter their materials into. I remember using the computer to generate labels for planting and labels for the field. I'd have to babysit that printer all night to get that all printed out. We're able to track everything now from start to scratch, and at the same time we developed an order system where the people can get online through the internet. They can log in, enter what they want to order, and it goes automatically in. We can review it on the computer. We can decide whether to ship it or not. We approve it. It goes out. It's automatically deducted from the quantity of seed we have on hand, so we got a running tally of what the material quantity we have on hand, and then we can make judgments on regenerations. About 10 years into my career, maybe 7 years or so, I became the IT manager as well as a corn curator. So I did both of those jobs, and one of the goals of that, I had the biggest collection to manage, for one thing, and we were getting thousands of accessions in at a time. So it made perfect sense for me to develop the tools that we could share across the station on the largest collection at the same time as I curated the maize collection. What I see happening is we're getting fewer and fewer people who are interested in working in the field, being able to find them and get them into the field in something they like. It seems to be a dwindling number of people who grew up in the field, learned how to love the material, and wants to work in the field. Now, every so often you will find somebody that's from a city background or something like that that says, boy, this is neat. I wish I was exposed to that a long time ago, but they're hard to find. I have a sentence I use, the 1,000-year plan. You have to plant a seed of an idea, but you have to be prepared to wait 1,000 years for some of it to occur. And one of my 1,000-year goals that I hope happens sooner than later and happens before some of this material passes away is that we develop robots that can do the hand pollinations. Then there's hope to be able to maintain this material. Be generalist in what you study before you come here. Yes, plants are important, botany, biology, and that kind of thing, but learn your history, learn your computer skills, learn your chemistry, because you're going to find that you're a specialist here, but you're more of a generalist as far as your knowledge goes, because you never know what client you're going to have and what kind of things you're going to satisfy, and you never know in your problem solving, and you really need to hone your problem solving skills. You never know where the solution to a problem is going to come from. For users of the germplasm, keep digging. Don't be afraid to ask beyond just the computer interface, because there's stuff hidden back there, including people, that may be able to make your science more efficient, your research project more efficient than what you originally thought it was. So just don't be blocked off. Be persistent in what you're looking for.